Hello. In this mini lecture, I would like to give a brief overview of a new pattern of political arrangements that emerged following the collapse of Charlemagne's empire in the middle of the 9th century. That arrangement of relationships is sometimes called feudalism, and it might suggest a level of organization and system that is actually not true, because feudalism is by its very nature very local, unsystematic, shifting alliances. But there were nevertheless a few patterns of relationships in these alliances. Feudalism responds to a very basic human question. We see this question wherever around the world today there is political disorder and insecurity. How do human beings bring about order at a very, very basic level? And we see in feudalism a reversion to coercion as the primary expression of authority. Feudalism is about regulating coercive relationships. At the top of the feudal relationships, if we can call it that, is the emperor or the king who lays some claim over a certain region or territory or principality. But the problem is always, how do you make good on the claims that you make? You say you can call yourself the king of Indiana, but how do you actualize that? How do you make it real? That's the problem that feudalism tries to address. And it does so by recognizing that power is ultimately held in the hands of henchmen, of strong people, people who have arms, who are able to gather around themselves other people who have arms. And feudalism, again, at its basis, is really about the coercive power. At the heart of feudalism is a relationship of a lord to a vassal. And this is going to be repeated at all kinds of levels. Feudalism has many, many different levels of relationships, but always about a relationship of a lord to a vassal. The lord, of course, is the superior, the more powerful, the one who has exerted his coercive authority over the vassal. And that relationship is defined in a formal ritual or a ceremony in which the vassal, in a formal way, kneels before the Lord, puts his hands together in a posture of submission, bows his head, and then the Lord, maybe you have this image in your mind from King Arthur movies, the Lord puts his sword on top of the shoulder or the head of the vassal and declares the vassal to be his man. And the vassal in turn swears an oath of fealty or loyalty to the Lord. And in that ritual, there is a crucial recognition of a line of authority. Now, behind that is the promise of the vassal to support the Lord in times of crisis, particularly in times of war. So if the Lord chooses to go off to battle, he has a right to call all of his vassals to his side, and the vassals are committed to bring their arms with them, to come armed with a horse, with weapons, perhaps with a foot soldier or two of their own. And so the most powerful lords are the ones who have the most vassals, who can call these vassals together when they want to fight a war. But feudalism is not just about fighting war. It's also the question of how do you control territory. And part of the ritual of the fealty oath, of the sometimes called the act of homage. Homage is when you become the homo, the man of the Lord. At the heart of that is the granting of a parcel of land called the fief, which the Lord gives to the vassal and tells the vassal, you can do with this as you please. It still belongs to the Lord, but I'm giving to you in trust for you to manage, for you to have oversight over, and for you to make productive, because that's always, military societies also need to produce food. So feudalism is about a military relation between the Lord and the vassal, but it also is about controlling territory in which the Lord gives a fief to the vassal in return for his loyalty. we see here the emerging beginnings of what becomes known as the aristocracy in Europe. The relationship of the lord to the vassal is always about special people. It's about people who have power. It's not about peasants or serfs. Feudalism is always about people who have the right to carry the sword and who have claim over land, but it's an effort to give some kind of structured relationship to that claim. And feudal relationships are always strongest the closer they are to the ground. That is, they are always strongest the more local they are. Somewhere in the feudal system there still is the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, who claims to have power over all of Europe. But in point of fact, real authority in feudalism rests close to the ground. One way of thinking about feudal relationships might be to call to mind images of the Godfather, or what images you might have of the mafia, in which there too we have relationships of authority rooted in coercion, always about defining territory, and at their heart there is a loyalty, an act of loyalty that is very personal. That's the heart of the feudal relationship. Now, as we will see, there are all kinds of complications. It could be that I am the vassal, and maybe my territory is Goshen Township, and as such I am the vassal of the Count of Elkhart, but I might also be the vassal, I might also have a parcel of territory over in LaGrange County, and so I might also owe allegiance to the Count of LaGrange. And the Count of LaGrange owes allegiance to the Duke of Indiana. And in this complex set of hierarchies, often it came about that somebody in the feudal system was loyal to more than one person. Sometimes those people would end up fighting each other. And so in the feudal oath of allegiance, there was always attention given to the liege lord, to the lord who was of ultimate authority in the event that there would be competing claims. I say that only, if it sounds confusing, it's because it is. I say that only to underscore the fact that feudalism was an effort to respond to political chaos, and what emerges is fragmented. It's not a very clear system, but it's a pattern of relationships that came to characterize European society. And as we will see, over time, these feudal arrangements began to sift themselves out into more clear sense of hierarchy, what became the European aristocracy. But that's a story for another time.